Without much else, I want to turn it over to this next panel on brand building and brand integration. And I've tasked my good friend Issa Salbini from Fuse to lead this conversation as he's been involved in this, and he's had some dialogue with our panelists, and so I'll turn it over to him. So enjoy.
Cool. All right. Are the mics on? Yes, they are. All right. I'm Issa from Fuse. If you guys don't know me or what we do, we're an agency out in Vermont. We connect brands with 12 to 34-year-olds, youth marketing. We were one of the very first action sports agencies and really focus on connecting brands across multiple platforms, experiences. Most of our clients are the Fortune 500 brands like Mountain Dew, Gatorade, Harley-Davidson, Procter & Gamble. We've got a great group of folks here today, and I'll do brief introductions, and then I'll allow them each to talk a little bit about their role. But the big job today is really to talk about connecting with targeted consumer groups, niche audiences, vertical audiences, consumer segmentation, however you guys might define it. But let's introduce the group, and then we'll dive right in. So starting with Jill Kinney. Jill's the director of Gatorade Branded Entertainment and Influencer Marketing, and I'll let her describe her role, but relatively recent new created role, really showing how important branded content and entertainment is in the world. We've got Greg at the end, Greg Lucia. He's Director of Brand Integration at Saatchi & Saatchi, and I think many folks know him as the face of Toyota, amongst other brands in the action sports space. And then we've got Scott Mellin, founder and CEO of Factory Design Labs, a great agency who works with the likes of North Face, Oakley, Callaway, Audi, and lots of really great brands across various lifestyle platforms. So we've got a great group of folks here. I think what our goal today is to help you guys understand how maybe some of the bigger corporate brands, the non-endemic brands, are connecting with these target audiences. So before we dive in, let me allow each of these guys to introduce themselves and talk just briefly about what they do kind of every day. So Jill, do you want to start?
Sure. Hopefully this will work because I wore the wrong outfit. But my name's Jill Kinney, and I'm based in Los Angeles. I'm the only person out of Gatorade, which is based in Chicago, the only person there just because of the entertainment world and so many production companies being out there. And like Issa said, I've been in this role for about 3 years, so relatively newer for the Gatorade brand, but there's just been so much more opportunity for, and I think especially in the sports landscape, to tell compelling stories, and we have such access to great athletes and scientists and resources that we've been able to, I think, do a lot in a relatively short amount of time, and acknowledge that we still have a lot more to learn and do. So I'll turn it over to you.
I'm Scott Mellin. I'm the CEO of Factory Design Labs. We're a full-service advertising agency focused on premium global lifestyle brands. We are currently the global agency of record for the North Face, for the Oakley brand, hi Maddie, for Callaway Golf, and we have a deep-rooted partnership with Aspen Snowmass, so stoked to be here. We operate offices out of Denver, out of Shanghai, China, and out of Verbier, Switzerland. We have a little bit south of $5 billion in brand revenue under management. So we have a big role as partners with these global brands in their efforts to create new customers around the world.
I'm Greg Lucia. I work at Saatchi & Saatchi, based in Los Angeles. I'm in a group called the Brand Integration Group. We effectively are the agency of record for North America for Toyota Motor sales. We're starting to influence a little bit more on the Scion brand as well. And my responsibility is to help the brand engage consumers outside of the normal place that they expect to see Toyota, which is the dreaded showroom. I also work on our stick and ball properties, NFL, NBA, NCAA, lifestyle brands, and our music content brands as well. So a little bit of everything.
So, I mean, we live in an amazing marketing world today. It's not Mad Men. We don't make a TV commercial and hope everybody sees it. We can try to deliver our product, our brand, our service to any number of subgroups. And I think my general belief is only a very small number of enormous brands can try to be everything to everybody. So maybe toilet paper, right? I think they probably have a good category to go after. But most brands need to identify who their actual target audience is. And so how do you connect your brand, create brand loyalty, awareness, drive sales, and hopefully create lifetime customers within certain subsegments. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think my first question for the panel here is really, how important is it to segment your messaging? How important are these specific customer groups to your brand? So, maybe we can start with Jill and talk about Gatorade. Obviously a great product that everybody knows, but how do you talk to specific groups, and how important are they for you?
Yeah, it is very critical that we're super laser focused on our core target, which is teen athletes, 13 to 18. Male and female competitive athletes, which does encompass action athletes as well. And because sometimes it's a common misperception that because we're Gatorade that sports fans are included in that, sometimes that just if you're interested in sports, but we're really looking for the participants and those that are hot and sweaty occasions. There was a time where our brand started to go a little too broad. And although you can get a good bump from that, it ultimately backfires. And so we've gone back to being very, very laser focused on what we do.
Yeah, I think in our world, the complexity becomes the activities that our brands participate in. Callaway's got a very simple customer base. They're golfers, and they enjoy a game that's got a very defined set of rules. In the case of Oakley, which moves from professional bass fishing all the way to NASCAR to Formula One to Olympic track and field and then action sports, understanding the target consumer becomes really vital in terms of the authenticity of the messaging. The best practices that we apply in these more complex environments really comes through a lot of research and a lot of global segmentation work that helps us identify the rational emotional triggers for the consumer depending on their activity and their needs. And that helps us as marketers kind of balance our messaging strategy. It helps our brand partners really develop their product strategies in a more concrete way, and allows us to get laser focused around a segment within each activity that we can win against and own, versus trying to be everything to everybody like a toilet paper brand.
Which, by the way, I heard a stat once that toilet paper only has 98% penetration or something. So I don't know what the other 2%.
It's a weird word you use.
Yeah.
Please.
Just a little factoid.
Yeah. When it comes to Toyota and our brand, we have 12 different products out there. They're all vastly different. Toyota just became the #1 in North America and the U.S. globally as far as sales. So recognition is not a problem for the brand. It's the connectivity to specific demographics that help drive the growth of the brand. We used to look at activities based on launches. We're launching Tundra, let's find truck properties. We're launching Yaris, let's find youth properties. That's sort of shifted over the last 2 or 3 years to very broad demographics, 4 core groups of demographics that the brand is targeting. And they are not earth-shattering, but there's certainly brand demographics that we take seriously. And I'll just say that the one that's most important and has quadrupled in budget and scope has been women. And we as a brand are focusing on women 30 to 39 with a household income of 75K plus. That's become pretty relevant for us. So we've gone out and created a triathlon series with women-only competitors called She-Rock. We've partnered with female triathletes, female brands. So we kind of approach it we already have awareness. There are other great brands out there that we compete against. We don't acknowledge them because some brands have great followers, and our brand is growing. It's not cool. We shouldn't be in this room. Toyota has no right to be sitting here, by the way, because we make Yaris. Raise your hand if you drive a Yaris. Yeah, exactly. So we are learning and growing and trying to figure out how we become relevant. So we base it by 4 basic groups: by demographic, and if they fit within those boxes, we then build out platforms. So we don't need awareness. We certainly need credibility, though.
Greg, as a follow-up, how do you kind of balance those audiences and finding the right products for them? So Yaris must be a great product for somebody in that audience, but how do you balance overall Toyota messaging versus product messaging, and what's the strategy behind that as you look at connecting with?
It's
certain
pretty.
groups?
Toyota Saatchi North America is agency of record for all Toyota brands. There are 12 regions as well. What we do at the national level is we try to communicate to everyone through eyeballs. So we'll buy Super Bowl spots, we'll create larger platforms for Camry, Prius, etc. But then what our job is to take that purchase funnel, which for Toyota, it is not, we have an infinite purchase funnel, I guess is the best way to put it. You can see us at Do Tour with a Yaris. You and your wife and your 2 kids can engage with that vehicle, and our sweet spot's called a button a seat. We want somebody to experience that vehicle at what I do, is an engagement. And then you can leave that experience, but that purchase consideration for our brand, like a $25,000 to $50,000 vehicle, is broad. We can't even define it in terms of six weeks, 6 months, and in some cases we track it to 2 years. So we can't, what we're trying to do at the brand integration level is influence consideration without having a time frame. I would love to be able to coupon post-event. Gatorade can do a coupon at a local. I can't do that because somebody might say, I saw Simon DeMont driving a Tundra on an online video, and he was getting to and from the mountain. My truck just took a dump, and I got to get a new vehicle. I might do that. But that process isn't 6 days or 6 weeks. It could be a year or so down the line. So our difficulty is defining the purchase funnel, at least driving consideration. And we do that by segment, and we do that specifically by demographic.
So, you mentioned the Simon video. I'll jump to Scott for a second. When you think about talking to these subsets, do you find a set of tactics that are most effective? I mean, each brand's going to be different, so maybe you can kind of comment a little bit about what you guys see as the most useful way to connect with these subgroups.
I think it comes down to some of the comments that were made by the previous panel about consumption habits. And each of these particular audiences have their favored way to consume content. So for us, it becomes a real requirement to understand by segmentation, by activity. And let me break that down just a little bit. So when we talk about the North Face as an example, there's 3 core activities that brand pursues: the outdoor space, the action sports space, and the performance sports space. And within each of those activities, there's 1 or 2 key segments of consumers that we're hyper-focused on. So once we understand who those segments are, we can do all of the background information and research on how they consume content. And then it becomes our job to create authentic content that stimulates them to purchase. And typically for us, that's a combination of things. It's about an athlete, it's about a product, it's about a benefit strategy that product brings to the foreground, but also the story, the event, the place, the expedition that's involved in that. And that becomes the cool part of this whole process, is developing that story that not only has an emotional connectivity with the consumer, but stimulates that rational side of, yes, I need that new jacket, or I need that new eyewear. That's the fun place.
So building on that, Jill, how do you guys customize your message, either by sport, by age, by gender? You can deliver a giant Super Bowl ad, but how do you go about talking to a snowboarder versus a basketball player, and do you get that sport specific?
We definitely do. It's just, it's not typically in our advertising. I mean, because we are such a big brand, and it's just not realistic to have an individual spot for each consumer. But that's why it's exciting what we get to do in content, and in particular for the action sports world. We create content that's specifically for Nigel Sylvester, a BMX rider, or for Ellery Hollingsworth. And then we're also able to, we have a whole program with NFL Films, for example, called Everything to Prove. I don't know if some of you might have seen it. It's a partnership where we're following rookies as they make it to the NFL. So we're able to get, much more specific to that audience and use those insights. That's on the content level, but then we also put a huge value on what we call formative experience. Because obviously if you have a coach or an athletic trainer or, a fellow boarder or someone that you respect giving you a Gatorade and telling you why it works, that is going to have the biggest impact on you, that grassroots experience. So we focus a lot on that one-to-one, and that's where we're able to customize messages as well. And then, of course, in the digital space and print, it's just not as much in the big advertising world.
So I want to shift gears, thinking about different segments and try to spin it into a way that I hope this audience can really get excited about. So I want to talk about the role of branded content and branded entertainment. And I think the last panel did a great job talking about, thinking of that end game, where that content could live. And, I think a lot of folks here are looking to monetize their content. We may have a few examples here where we've got some brands looking to generate some of that visibility, authenticity, and relevance. And so I want to jump in and talk a little bit about where branded content and entertainment falls in your overall marketing efforts and maybe how that's changed in the past 4 or 5 years. So, Jill, why don't we start with you? I know it was a role that was created.
Right.
Trend.
I mean, I think that's probably the biggest example is we just didn't really do that much branded entertainment, and the fact that this role didn't exist 3 years ago until they asked me to move to LA and start this, and I didn't have any idea what I was getting into, but have absolutely loved it, and am especially, it's, I think something that, I don't know if everyone realized, can you hear me okay? This thing keeps going in and out. In the action sports world, content is just so inherent to what you do. There's no justifying it, or it just is part of the world. Whereas when you're on, so there's no question that we create action content, but from a broader standpoint, and especially when you're a consumer packaged good company, the justification and showing the return on investment, and that's not just about eyeballs, it's about engaged eyeballs, all of that. I mean, it's I would say that's probably, I'm still in the process of educating everyone internally about the value of branded entertainment. But obviously it's a huge step that we even created this department.
It's interesting. I think, I've said this at other conferences, but action sports really, we didn't invent branded entertainment, but, the first snowboard films were about selling skateboards and snowboards. And when you look at corporate America today, everyone is trying to find ways to create branded content. How do they integrate their brand into some type of content that delivers on a message? And, a lot of folks in this room have been doing it for the last 20 years, which is pretty amazing. And so we almost have an advantage in that it really is part of our DNA. If you're a brand that works with the NFL, for example, the hurdles that you have to jump through with a players association, a league, exclusive media partnerships, it's not that anyone's job here is easy to go out and make, an amazing ski film, but a lot of times brands have enormous hurdles they have to jump through, and it's significantly more complex just to create something, much less get it out there. So, I think we should all be proud in the action sports space that we're really innovators in this world and embrace that and continue to push the bar and move, hopefully quicker and faster than other folks. But, you mentioned the NFL, Everything to Prove. I'd love to get a couple other examples of branded content. I know when I think about it, it can be original content that's created by the brand. It can be integration of a brand into another project. Lots of different ways that you can kind of categorize that. But, Scott, maybe you could talk a little bit about a few examples of branded content, and then Greg as well. I'd love to hear a few that you guys have done, just to give a sense of the type of programs that you guys are working on.
I think from an honest perspective, everything that we do for the North Face, Oakley, Callaway is branded content. It's just part of the DNA of the communication strategy. as you referenced earlier, we were the digital agency of record and the showroom agency of record for Audi of America for 5 years. And so I think that's kind of a more relevant
You guys
case
shouldn't
study.
Hey.
No fighting.
We could share a lot on the topic
Great,
of
yeah.
showroom, for sure. Audi had a particular problem in that it has a multi-million-dollar investment in ski racing, both at the FIS level and also at the U.S. ski team level and a lot of other federations around the world. And the unfortunate reality here domestically is that you don't have a big TV audience because there's not a lot of TV coverage of ski racing. And so what they looked at was, okay, we've got this one big blip on our investment radar for our integration into snow sports, and that's the Olympics. But at the Olympics, we have to take the logo off the uniforms. So how do we get credit for this huge investment and this very sustained, durable investment that we're making in ski racing and make sure that we get some equity play off of that? And so the concept that we came up with was, let's take credit for it before the Olympics. We know we can't own it during the Olympics outside of an advertising space, but we need some branded content that's really going to drive this message. And so we developed a concept and a theme around a 90-minute movie around the road to the Olympics of the U.S. ski team. And Todd, I believe you partnered with us on this from a production point of view. But the beauty of that storytelling was we were able to put it in the marketplace through a very deep relationship with iTunes to get that in front of millions of consumers well before the Olympics. And by the time Bodie and Lindsay and Ted stood in the starting gate, we already had that association established between Audi, these athletes, and ski racing. So I think that was a good case study of how to move around the requirements of a league or a federation, how to transfer equity in a meaningful way to the brand through authentic storytelling.
3 things real quickly on that. Number one, 2 years ago, Saatchi & Saatchi had 17 people in the print team and 4 in the digital media. Today, there are 3 people in the print team and 72 in the digital team. So our focus has changed. 2 things that made that relevant was we put together a program called Tundra Deconstructed. In the U.S., in order to be successful, you have to sell trucks in the heartland. And our truck is made in San Antonio, Texas, but we're a Japanese-owned company, so we couldn't exploit the Americanization of that. So what we did, Deconstructed was a digital platform that's now going to have its 2nd year that lives online. And it essentially, we gave 4 stock Tundras to Flying J Ranch in Texas. It's a 3,000-acre ranch in the middle of nowhere. And we said to them, we'll be back in a year, and please beat the shit out of these trucks. And they're like, okay, you're going to come back and pick up the pieces? And we're like, yes, sir. But here's the deal. We're going to film every inch of that. So our friends at GoPro and the other folks that we work with, we filmed it. And that guy did everything he could, short of driving that thing off yet another cliff, to show that that Tundra was not a well-made vehicle. And at the end of it, he basically handed us the keys. We put them on a flatbed. We took them back to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where they were designed, and we deconstructed. We took that truck apart piece by piece and said, this has got more stress than it should have. This has got less stress. So that whole thing lived online. Strangely enough, in my world, in the action sports space, I have a conference call that started 10 minutes ago with an action sports athlete, a snowboarder, who we would not work with normally because we've already got 6 strong athletes within the action sports space. But this snowboarder has a really, really great property and a really great name and a really great platform. And his agent brought it to us, and we worked with her, and we said, you know what? We can't add another athlete, but let's see about getting him product. And he already drives our product, and that really wasn't relevant. And then we found out that somebody in the digital group knew him and said, we really want to work with this guy. And we sat in the room, and I said, I don't have budget. And everyone said, we don't have budget. And then we said, why don't we do a deconstructed with this athlete in the snow space? Why don't we give him our truck and let him beat the shit out of it, because we know that he will, and we know that he'll use it in production. So that's kind of how content created by necessity has kind of built to something more relevant. And we're about to hopefully get that deal done and push that through. But it all was based on the one focus, which is the product and making that product relevant.
So, Greg, you mentioned partnering with GoPro on that. I'm curious if you guys can share some tips with the audience. There's some content creators out there that I'm guessing might love to work for you guys at some point to make something, create something. What's your recipe for success when you're working with content creators? How do you identify who will build it, create it, concept it, the whole process? I'd be interested in everybody's feedback because I think it'd be useful for the audience.
Yeah, real quickly, we learned years ago at Saatchi that we don't know jack shit about cool kids. We couldn't create content. We did some Do Tour ads that were beyond terrible. They resonated with a stuffed animal and a kid in Arkansas. It was like, wow, really bad. But we put a lot of money into it, so that was good. We then went back and said to our athletes, which is the driving force and the absolute pillar of how we use our vehicle messaging now, is that our athletes drive the content, our athletes drive the authenticity, and I know we don't like to say that word, and then we looked at who those athletes worked with, and then we went to those athletes' production groups or partners or whatnot, and we brought them in to do very small pieces, and now we're growing that. So it was based on our failures thinking that we were cool enough to know how to create spots, failing, and then going to our athletes who their voice was absolutely the most credible way to do that, and they introduced us to people that they work with, and that's what we're doing now. So I don't know if
that's great.
Short way to do it. But
Joe, how about with you guys? How are you finding the right kind of production partners across all your different projects?
I think the distribution panel nailed it when they were talking about it's not just about writing a check and then you get to go make whatever you want to make. So that's probably the biggest thing is think of us not as a bank, but as a true partner because we have, I mentioned before, access to athletes and to the leagues and to our Gatorade Sports Science Institute, because for us that's an important message to get across. And we have a lot to offer in terms of being a partner to create the content. And if you do it, and not to mention the distribution, because it's the first question that I always ask. That was one of my first learnings coming into this role was it's not if you build it, they will come. You have to know where it's going. So that's another key. I mean, it's a lot of what was already said at that first panel, but that has been huge. And we can kind of be a pain in the ass, I guess, because we are going to be very involved. But in the end, there's a better product for it, I think.
Scott, I'd love to take that, what's the best way to balance, the creative skills of the production side with, the goals of the client and, how do you get through that, potentially bumpy road?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, that's the role of the advertising agency, is that you have a very clear understanding of what the commercial objectives of the brand are, because no money is spent without an ROI. So our relationship with the brand is to understand the go-to-market strategy and process, to understand what products are bubbling up to the top of the pyramid in terms of opportunity and commercialization. What are the relevant athletes in the space and opportunities around events, and then create a concept around that, a concept that takes in balance our understanding of the customer segment, the activity, the product, bring that into a concept, and then find the right production partner that can bring that to life in a really authentic, powerful, creative way. So our job isn't to get in the way of the creativity. It's to give it some boundary around the commercial objective of the brand, but to allow guys like Chase and Todd and the Camp 4 guys that we work closely with, the in-house teams at Oakley, to let those guys bring it to life in a way that meets everybody's objectives and is fun to produce.
I feel like I need to amend my answer a little bit. Go ahead. Because yes, we're a pain in the ass in terms of being involved, but there's always a huge acknowledgement of the expertise that our partner is bringing to the table, of course. Like, obviously in NFL Films, who we're working with, they know storytelling and they know the football landscape. And so we're going to, and, working with the Barracks for what we've produced with Chaz. I mean, so I just have to throw that back in there.
I would also like to throw something out. We really also need to consider the brand and the risks the brand is willing to take. Toyota is a very risk-averse brand in general. The approval process for us to get something out, meaning just out within one of the mini platforms, is 7 steps. There are 7 different legal groups that have to review it. So while we want to put out things that are cutting edge and we want to make Yaris look cool, there are 7 groups of lawyers who are very angry and very bored that are sitting back at Toyota going, nope, nope, no. So you get this really great product that is then siphoned down to something that is safe for Toyota. The first conversation I ever had with Louis Vito before he said one word was, we're risk averse. And know that in whatever you do in our vehicle on air. And to this day, he calls me Mr. Risk Averse. I don't think he even knows my name. So as you talk to different brands and those brands and their objectives, just realize an Oakley or some of those brands are willing to take steps that a brand like mine couldn't do. So that limits what we can do, but it also gives us an opportunity. So.
I mean, I think there may be a connection there between choosing to create something from the ground up versus potentially sponsoring or
Correct.
supporting another program. And maybe the two aren't directly connected, but how are you guys selecting whether you're just going to go out and try to create a great new idea versus going out and looking for an amazing opportunity to get your brand involved? What's the balance and process there? I'll let each of you guys kind of chime in.
I think, well, for us, a lot of it depends on, I mean, in an ideal world, if we had unlimited budgets, I think we would do everything original content, and we would love to, just do even more experimental kind of work, but it doesn't work that way. We are fortunate, though. I mean, you take the good and the bad of being part of such a large organization. It's very frustrating when you have this 7 teams of lawyers. I mean, the legal department is not a fan of what we do because almost everything we do we haven't done before and they don't have the template for. I mean, but that said, the good part is there are already some media investments in place and we can then take advantage of the value add. So, we were able to do an integration with a show that MTV was doing called Nothing But Net. And that was for not that much of an additional production value, so we went ahead and did that. We obviously have a pretty significant investment with the NFL, so we were able to take that deal and turn it into the Everything to Prove program that I was talking about. So there's a balance, and then we do, like I mentioned, the projects with Action Sports, or we did some integrations with So You Think You Can Dance, because we had a couple of years ago when we were talking about democratizing athleticism. We've moved away from that a little bit more, but those are some of the examples of what.
I mean, I think you bring up a great point, and I know there's a lot of media folks in the room. I mean, the media landscape, the media deal isn't just about impressions anymore. And I know a lot of the folks out there who I work with on a regular basis are offering content production services. It's more than just insert advertisement here. How are you guys seeing your ad buys changing? How are your media partnerships changing? Scott, do you have thoughts in terms of the evolution of where we are today in terms of media partnerships?
I think that the evolution, to use your word, is really become less about a channel agnostic approach and more of an omni-channel approach in terms of how can I take this idea, this concept that we've come up with as an agency that we're going to run as a campaign, and how can we distribute as broadly as possible through our media partners and all of their individual channels. So add value is always a concept, but now it's really more about an omni-channel approach, and the better publishing partners have more opportunities for us. That's really kind of the general overview that we're looking at the media space with right now.
Greg, for you guys, and sponsorships, media partnerships, how are you balancing delivering your message versus creating something with them?
Yeah, I couldn't agree. You and I have kind of the same, we have exactly the same challenges and opportunities because we have a lot of opportunities within the media landscape. A perfect example is back when NBC wanted to get back into the football game. They created Sunday Night Football, and I was on the team that originally heard that pitch and helped kind of define what that was. And we asked for something more than just in-studio logo, and that's what came of the 45 seconds that you see at the end of every Sunday Night Football halftime show, the Toyota show, that is a throw or a lead-in from the anchor, Bob Costas, to creative that then rolls right into that. It feels like the same piece of content. And that same conversation with NBC then led to them bringing us an opportunity within Dew Tour, which was new at the time as well. So a lot of the opportunities that Toyota gets come from existing partnerships with NBC, ESPN, et cetera. And then what we're finding now is those partnerships are splintering into more specific, definitely digital, absolutely social media driven, and the content that we need to plug that, they're offering to create for us, and we're typically, in all cases, refusing to, and using partners and content that we know we can help drive. So we have the exact same chest of goodies, so to speak. It's just a matter of how we leverage those.
It's the sawdust that you
Yeah,
were referring
exactly.
to on the earlier panel, because it used to be, that value add stuff, you'd stick a logo and no one really thought about it. And now, ESPN has a content team and there's a whole team, there's teams to work with you.
That's not to say that somebody couldn't have a great idea and it could somehow get through the system and you could crash the gates and burn the castle and put the proposal in front of us and we're going to do it. Those days are non-existent, sort of. You have to have, at least with a brand as large as ours, there has to be some point of reference and some platform where it makes sense. Because everyone that's crashing the gates, they're doing something called toyotaproposals.com, which I haven't looked at since I had hair. So it's like a dumping ground.
Don't put your proposal for your movie up
Yeah, don't put it in, because that's what that's designed for. But something that's got real relevance within a strategy and a platform that we can partner, I think it's a bit more consideration and certainly helps move the brand forward.
Maybe I can add another layer, if I could. When these brands get to a certain scale, there's a real reality that you actually are a publisher. So when we look at the aggregated audience for a brand like the North Face, 5 to 8 million uniques a month at TNF.com, millions of Facebook fans. We've got over 2 million installed applications on iPhones. It changes your role in the universe. Like you have to be pushing content all the time to satisfy that customer demand. And the media partners, coming back to your media question, really serve a super important component, like Brad as an example. That publication touches the heart and soul of the most important customer in the ski space. And that's the kid on the floor of the ski shop that sells those products. And it's the decision maker, it's the influencer. And so even while we're looking up here, at New York Times and ESPN and NBC, we have to have guys like Brad in this space because they really touch the heart and soul of the business in a way that these larger media empires can't.
Great. Well, I want a little bit of time to open up for questions. If you are selling something, you can wait till the end and talk to these guys later. So no proposals in front of everybody, but let's talk through and hear some questions from the audience.
Jeff Stump, I kind of wanted to hear you expand on that, because here you are in the ski business, at a ski conference, skiing snowboard, snow sports, and traditionally we hear, oh, you're such an influential market, we want to work with you. But we hear that in conversation, and we don't see it actually a lot. We think. What do you think?
Well, it's the DNA of Oakley and the North Face. You know, that's their core audience. So I think we have a lot of permission to be in these spaces. You know, speaking historically for Audi, the point of view around the audience was always connectivity. So four-wheel drive, snow, and drivers. It was a pretty simple thought process.
I mean, I'd echo that. I mean, I've grown my entire business around the idea that this is an incredibly influential audience, and connecting in an authentic way helps big brands, you know, borrow a little bit of equity, but also come in and support what you're doing and grow the space all the way around. And so, absolutely incredibly important. And when we worked several years ago to bring Gatorade into the space, I mean, it was a no-brainer. You know, that they just frankly had just ignored action sports and snow sports specifically because there was such a great important focus on your basic team sport. So it wasn't even a question that they needed to be in the space.
Yeah, and we wouldn't be in this space if we didn't have a product that was functional to it. So four-wheel drive, that's an obvious thing, but more importantly, it's the winning over the hearts and minds and understanding that while mom and dad are getting in their Sequoia or their Tundra, dad's using that Tundra, they're not barreling through the snowdrifts in their Yaris, thank God, but that consideration
Just
is down
one time.
the road.
Just once.
Just once. But that consideration helps build, and for us, we have local dealers that we really have to consider. Those local dealers are in these communities, and they're selling those products. And if we can give them a national platform to see Louis Vuitton or do tour, whatever that is, and then that rub goes down to that guy that's in Golden or wherever it is where he's actually trying to sell product at the grassroots level, then that gives us a real meaning to be there, for sure.
And it's
Yeah. And I would just add on to the functional, I mean, Gatorade is G-Series is functional in an entirely different way than Toyota would be, but just the way I mean, we're all about athletes. So whether you're a snow sport athlete or a stick and ball sport athlete, you know, the product works for you in the same way.
I mean, 18 million participants. There's 92 million fans of action sports in the United States and 600 or 700 million globally. You need seasonal selling strategies, creative stuff for holiday timeframe. Winter sports is an absolutely amazing platform for brands to connect with participants, fans, and actually make themselves look and feel great so they can do something awesome. So, you know, this is an amazing place for brands to come in as long as they do it right. I mean, everybody's seen brands that have done it terribly. So as long as you do it the right way, it can be done well.
I would also note that in all of Toyota North America, there are 16 total athletes. The largest automotive manufacturer in the world, we have 16 athletes. And of those 16 athletes, none are stick and ball. 6 of them are action sports. 3 are triathletes, and 4 are professional bass fishermen. And I know I've missed some numbers in there, but Toyota doesn't have any stick and ball athletes. We have 6 within the action sports space. That kind of shows how important this space is to us, and certainly one that we're investing in and building on.
Yeah.
Like storytelling is risky, and that story can actually during the actual telling of the story and not just the production. How do you guys balance that risk with talking to your audience and giving your audience reason to care, and maybe putting your brand second? Because if you shove brand content down maybe the key, rule of your brand, where's the narrative arc that draws me in and that makes me connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, there's no exact formula. It's always tough to make sure that I think it also depends what brand you have, because, we are authentic to the sports landscape, so that helps right there. And there's been many times where we have been the ones that are toning down our branding, much to the surprise of whatever the distribution partner is or producer we're working with, because we want to make sure there's that balance. I mean, we always say we want to entertain, to educate, to engage, and if you don't entertain first, forget it. So, I mean, in general, that's how I would answer your question.
I think the other kind of strategic advice I give is fail fast, and a lot of brands want to make content, and big brands tend to be a little bit impatient. They want things done quickly. They expect, I don't think that a lot of folks know how long it takes to film a movie part or to create an entire movie. They think, 2 days, we'll go out and get that done, right? Well, what if the weather's wrong? Fail fast and then move on to the next thing. And don't put out garbage, because a lot of times there's a culture that says, well, we just made this and maybe it's not so good, but we did it anyway, so we might as well put it out there. And I much prefer that, nobody ever sees it if it's not good. So, you got to roll the dice a little bit.
We've killed a lot of stuff before the consumer ever saw it.
We go out of our way to make sure that our content is not Toyota driven, if that makes sense. We go out of our way to make sure that the athlete is relevant, credible, and is using the product, and we pull back on the glory shot or anything, because that automatically we lose credibility. So we push back on our partners and those athletes to talk about the brand in a way that they would want to hear from other people. And I can't tell you how much content we've pulled back because it was too heavily auto show, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a question about, I call it squish the puppy syndrome. So, as a content creator myself, I get hired by our friends, such as the men you represent, and say, we want to work with you because you know how to do X and Y and Z. And then at some point in the process, there's a mind shift change in either the partner or the partner's boss or somebody's boss's boss that reminds you, and it goes all the way down the food chain to the creator, that, actually the brand knows better. So how do you balance that? And no doubt it's a fine act, but it's just, there's a lot of companies that are notorious for doing it. We're bringing you in because you're great at this, and say, okay, here's how to do this, and they say, we can't do that. Then you shouldn't have fucking hired me.
Is the puppy squished at that point, or is it still alive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When does it die?
I'm trying to understand the metaphor too.
Yeah.
They love the puppy.
Yeah.
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 You love it so much to
Yeah.
the point of.
Okay,
Got it.
and
Yeah.
the last thing I'm going to do
Yeah.
is put my personal brand on the line to
Yep.
create something that's not,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get
but
that.
I know that I want it.
Yeah. Yeah, we, again, I guess know the brand that you're working at or working with, because Toyota is designed that every 2 years you rotate. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are, you rotate. So essentially the keeper of the brand strategy, the one that's keeping the puppy alive, needs to live somewhere, and it's going to rotate in our case. And most likely at Gatorade, they rotate as well. So there needs to be somebody that holds, and if you can get to them and know that every 2 years, that person that's in charge is absolutely going to want to change what the last guy did because he wants to put his mark on it. So by definition, we kill a lot of puppies. And
Don't forget that this is being recorded, right?
I was going to say,
not really kill a lot of puppies.
head of Toyota marketing, we kill a lot of
dude.
puppies.
Your PR team is going to be all over your shit.
Help. No, what I'm saying is the keeper of that strategy needs to be somebody that you identify and understand a long-term. Nobody wants to do a 1 or 2 year or 1 or 2 off project. It has to have some, where are you coming from to get to this point? And if we do this, how long can we keep this going? So it's the process of corporate change is going to be there with groups like us. It's a matter of identifying the strategy that will get you a year or 2 or whatever that is, because by definition, they're always going to be moving and changing.
Well, I was just going to say, because, I mean, it sounds like it's happened to you. It's definitely happened to me as well. And then you learn, and as much as you can up front, manage it. And the other thing is sometimes we are probably just as frustrated as you, is the other factor. And then and then with experience, like I said, you manage up as much as you can. You learn And then there's sometimes you know what things to sort of just let them go out there, and maybe everybody, you don't have to, you just learn to balance it. But I think the reality is sometimes, unfortunately, even no matter how much you plan, it just happens sometimes.
Yeah,
Hopefully the heavy lifting's been done up front.
Yeah, I mean.
So like in our case, we might bring 3 to 5 concepts to our client, and we'll narrow that down to the one that goes into production. And for us, it's about this establishment of trust between the brand and the agency so that we can keep that concept alive through all the nuances of the production cycle, so that our partners can establish and affect it most creatively. So if we do all this work up above, then the production side of it should go pretty smooth.
Well, the fact that all of you are up here talking about this, it puts you in that quadrant that isn't necessarily the kinds of people that I'm describing, but I try and take an 80-20 approach. I'm wondering if you think this is the right one. Like, I try and identify these people early, people that do have that understanding and depth and support, that the knowledge comes in, you bring the knowledge in for a reason, and that I've never really had great success at educating. The educating takes time and money, and at the end, it never ends up right where you want it. It's kind of like the girlfriend that it's like, if she would just be X or Y or Z, sort of I just haven't thought of getting out early. Do you guys have you guys been able to change over time, or are we pretty much, if I get in and I'm not smelling what I think I should smell,
Totally.
I'm out?
I mean, if it's not super well defined by the time it gets to you, we're all in deep shit.
I would also look at, in that space, how long that brand has been in that space. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but a lot of brands have gotten in and out of the action sports space or whatever that. Look at what their track record is before you even get there, because there's, consumers will smell a fraud a mile away if they knew that they were there 4 years ago, 2 years ago, and they're only in there for a year and then they're gone. So kind of look at who's had some longevity and attach yourself to that, knowing that that's probably a strategy that's not going to change overnight. The energy drink category is endemic to that space, but there's a lot of brands that have dipped their toe in it and are still there. Those are probably the ones that you would want to go after a little harder than the ones that are fleeting. So,
Other questions?
we love puppies, by the way,
Maddie?
just so you know.
Just a quick question to brand building and just a little insight to action sports. I think when most of the people in this room got started, it was very much participatory and individualistic in regards to snow sports. We became friends. There were sponsors. Sponsors turned into companies. Companies now turning into brands. But it all really started with the athletes and what they've been able to do to build up those brands. And my question is how do you now, with these companies, really deal with the fact that some of these brands that the athletes have built are equal to or bigger into what some of the things you're marketing, and how do you balance that out? So I think it's an interesting thing that I'm working with currently. I just want to get some insights.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows the handful of athletes who've kind of bridged the gap to celebrity in action sports, and so I think there are some brands who are looking for that. There are other athletes kind of within the space that have an enormous core following, and their brand is so important that they may not want to break away from that brand, and so maintaining their own authenticity is just as important. And I think a lot of it comes down to athlete selection and understanding when goals are not aligning. And so even if you've got somebody that's been on the team for 8 years and they're amazing, if their brand is starting to take a different path from where your brand is, it's time to really reevaluate some stuff. And so, trying to force two paths back together may just never work. And, I know when we're working with different brands, some of the brands, frankly, they want as much contest exposure as they can get. And as long as an athlete is doing well in contests, great. And, this will sound a little bit harsh, but the day when they're not doing great with contests is kind of the day that they're not going to be on the team anymore. These days, it's a whole lot different. That's probably 15 years ago. Now, content, social media, there's so much more. So the brand of the athlete is far more important than if they're just on the podium sometimes. But the brands have to match. So I think it's always changing, and there's no perfect answer unless you get into a specific brand athlete discussion. So
The relationship discussion, really, I guess, is like I'm saying, is that action sports is on the pinnacle platform now. It is some of the companies, it is some of the smaller, groupings, but it's just nice to kind of see how you're balancing that act of brand, relationship, core consumer, and then realistically, promoting what it is that we're trying to do, which is activity on the mountains and selling tickets.
And I think there are some brands who've done a great job crossing over and bringing action sports athletes into a different space and kind of giving them some broader exposure, building their fan base, and potentially trying to bring some of that outside, youth culture relevance, be it music or other areas in. So I think it's really tricky, but respecting that athlete's brand and message it's got to be first. You don't mess with the wrong athlete. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that the athlete serves this really critical role because it's the humanity behind the brand message. And if you just want to compete on product and features and specs, that's really boring. And the life cycle of success of being able to do that is, I think it's really tough. It's why car companies don't just talk about horsepower and braking performance. It's why they have all these other solutions to attach themselves emotionally to consumers. In our world, it's part of our DNA, so it's kind of a beautiful combination of cool product, great brands, athletes that have this real human story, the Tanner comeback as an example. Those are great stories that people can really emotionally integrate with, personally, professionally. We're in a unique space for sure. And I know some of your challenges. I mean, Oakley has absolutely the gold standard sports marketing machine in the entire sports industry, in my opinion. You guys do an amazing job. But athletes change. They grow up, they go off the rails, they come back on the rails. It's a big challenge, and it comes back down to relationships and trust. And then there's also the unfortunate but real reality of what's the commercial contribution. There has to be an ROI for those investments.
And those investments aren't getting cheaper. I mean, the good news, and I'm so excited that athletes are making great livings, and that there's no deal that I did 16 or 18 years ago that could sign even kind of the most entry-level pro right now. So the dollars are up, and again, it's just got to be done the right way. All right, yeah.
I think speaking of ROI, I'm curious to see how you guys follow your programs beyond clicks and video views and app downloads, and translate all those great things that you're doing to the brand that you're working for to show concrete evidence that you're driving sales, or if that's the objective of the program. Right. How you tell them what you're doing is actually awesome, it's working.
We just say it's awesome and they believe us.
I know. I mean, yeah. I wish we could just see these comments. Actually that is something that's the thing that keeps me up at night, is because I know on some level that, obviously if you get your consumer to engage in the content, they're going to be more affected. And we view the content as more equity building than volume driving. And we have certain equity measures and so we've been able to track, like we did a show called Inside Endurance, and we were able to show that brand backed by science, like those equity measures rose. So we've had little things like that we're able to show, but this is actually something we're really working to figure out. And then it came up on the other panel about, it's not just the views, but there's 80% completion rate on viewing the content for a 6-minute piece. That's huge. So I don't know if you guys have any,
Yeah, we have a multitude of KPIs that we work against on a monthly basis. For most of our brands, we're working against what we call a brand tracker that measures awareness and consideration on a monthly basis. And then on a quarterly basis, we're working against KPIs by activity focused on core communication components that we want to own. So when we do these segmentation studies, what bubbles out of those is your brand stands for protection, durability, style, etc. You can only own a couple of those at the end of the day because we have a limited amount of media resources to be able to push singular messages into the marketplace. And so what we do is define, what do we want to own as a brand? You know, is it cool? Is it style? Is it protection? Is it durability? Is it fit and function? And then we track that on a quarterly basis to make sure that our communication is staying true to that objective. And then on a seasonal basis, once a campaign is complete, we go to MMA, and we measure the effectiveness of the media buy from a pure ROI perspective. And things that aren't delivering at least a 2 are out of the mix. Or we're optimizing the creative or the buy to make sure that they're at least on life support until they can get to an optimization that we're all happy with and a delivery that we're all happy with.
There's just no simple answer because, I mean, the world's changed. It used to be if you just bought ads and radio spots, you could just have the reach, but
We
you
created
have
a
to have a
thing
whole
called
platform.
ROMI, Return on Marketing Investment, that we created for Toyota. So we take on an annual basis and a biannual basis, we do everything from ITVX data on the broadcast side to on-the-ground research. It's really important for us to have research at events. We're at Do Tour and Bass events and whatnot. And then we put that into a cost per hood, so to speak. So we have a very, very finite, about 17 steps that go into that. And each one of the programs that we have is reviewed on an annual basis against the objectives. So ITVX, things like that. And our partners at Google and some of the other ones help us in that process. So while we have an undefined purchase funnel, we have an absolute, and the sweet spot to that is somebody on site saying, yes, I want a dealer to contact me in this case, and that is absolutely trackable. But remember, that's for a brand that's funnel is this big, it's not easy, but that's what we consider a sweet spot. So
A lead.
yeah, a lead.
I think we have just maybe one more question.
We love
Yeah.
puppies.
And I know that various companies go about, they're very market-driven or innovative-driven. And I just want your opinion on kind of, is that a pulsating thing that should happen in the company, or should it grow one way and then, with awareness, and then all of a sudden you need this credibility factor, or kind of which company should have which? It's just, I don't know, it's an interesting thing, and I just wanted your opinion on it.
Well, it's a combination of the creative and the media buy strategy. And so, as example, we spend in total worldwide about $150 million on marketing of one of our key brand partners. And the product lines that are associated within that set of advertising creatives on a global basis, 12 months out of the year, we sell $150 million worth of product, of that exact product. Outside of that, there's another $1.5 billion worth of stuff that's sold. So from a creative perspective, we never change the focal point of what the message is. And that's a core message. But the media buy is designed to create customers, new customers, that don't necessarily need that level of product, but are buying the next level and the next level. And that's how we build brands.
I think for big kind of consumer packaged goods brands, not equipment brands, the challenge can be a little bit different. You have many drinks to choose from, and so what does that drink stand for? And so you have to have some of that, personality, equity, authenticity, relevance. You've got to create what that brand stands for. But then when you get to the size of a Gatorade, when you're talking about billions of dollars in sales and an enormous global reach, you also have to find a way to scale up and make sure you do have the impression. So figuring out which is more important, ultimately, who you are, what you're going to say, and how you're going to reach them, it's this mix that you've got to find the right balance for. It's no good to reach lots of people and not say the right thing. It's also probably not great to say the most amazing, cool, authentic thing and only have 5 people hear it if you need to sell billions of dollars worth of product. So to me, it's always finding it's a perfect balance.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. We'll be around if you guys have more questions, and we can eat now.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you all for the participation.